No, I was just going to ask Jeeves, actually, in terms of gender equality, in terms of being both represented in their own faith community, also able to challenge their own faith communities about the issue. I just wondered if you could say something.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to getting young people involved in places of worship or faith institutions, it's also an uphill battle. So that's very, very challenging. And there's different ways that you can get young people more involved within the leadership and giving them positions of responsibility. I actually spoke to a place of worship about this recently, and we spoke about putting together a mentorship program where the young people actually mentor the older people. And in some places of worship, I don't think that would be taken too well. I think the idea of elder people being mentored by younger people perhaps isn't. There is a big cultural barrier there. But also, I mean, when it comes to supporting young people and getting young people involved in these spaces, when I think of leadership, and again, this is what I tell the faith leaders that I speak to, intrinsic within a lot of the faith traditions that I've engaged with is the idea of servant leadership. And that's the idea of serving not yourself, but your congregation and the beneficiaries of the church or office of faith-based charity, the faith-based charity. And that means all of those individuals that you serve. And it's really important to spread that message. Have I answered your question? I don't think I have. Sorry, I've gone on a tangent. What was the question? I know you asked this, so I can ask it. So from our experience, from the young people that we've engaged with, they haven't felt like they've been able to have that voice. I think it's quite interesting in terms of young people and how they feel about their identity as well when it comes to faith. So when we speak to different universities, myself, it was actually Maeve who was here, and Tara went up to the University of Derby. And Derby University were telling us their multi-faith centre is actually not a part of the university. It is, but it's a separate entity, neither here nor there. But they were saying that faith is unfortunately, for a lot of students, looked at as a negative word. It's almost like they don't want to mention it to other individuals that they speak to, maybe in more secular society. And that's because they're really worried that from when they say that they're a particular faith, that's going to mean that they're also condoning sort of quite oppressive values and that sort of thing. So from what we're seeing is that young people are trying to disassociate themselves from traditional sort of manifestations of religion and faith. Again, I don't think this is answering your question. I do apologize. But this is just another correlation that we've been finding with young people. They are disassociating with their faith and religion. But it's interesting because when you see things like the census results come out and the headline would be, I don't know, faith is on the decline or something like that, that's untrue. I just think the relationship between young people and their faith is very different, and more work needs to go in exploring that.
Andrew, I know you are director of the Feast. I wonder if you could speak into that question at all from the perspective of your work with young people.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just first say I'm a member of a church. I'm now a church warden, which means I have enormous power. Sure. But in our church council, we have a young person, a teenager, Esther. She is on our church council. So not only do we have a young person, we have a young woman on our church council, and that's really brilliant. And I think this sense of, do young people see themselves represented and their kind of place in it, I think that is an enormous challenge. I think what Jeeves has just rightly said, how do we give the kind of space for young people to be themselves? Some want to join into leadership, some don't, because it comes with responsibility and you have to turn up to meetings and boring things, but how we give them that space to do that. And I think where they see themselves represented in their attitudes, I think what you've just highlighted is really important, because actually for a lot of young people, issues around sexuality and identity are both important, but also not an issue. It doesn't need discussing. It's been resolved. And yet for a lot of places of faith, it's still too controversial to even talk about. And young people are going, they're identifying as they, what's the issue? We don't even see an issue. Why do I want to be part of an organisation that doesn't even want to discuss whether that's a possibility? So I think you're quite right that there are some huge issues there about how we bring them into, but it is doable. And there are some really good kind of examples of that and how we give them that confidence to say, this is my faith and this is my story. And that's legitimate, even if the rest of the world challenges that legitimacy.